the biggest, the baddest, no bull. That last part was a total goddamn lie. There was so much goddamn bull on this show, it was piling up higher and higher and higher like a pile of dirty laundry that you don't want to touch because you're afraid it's growing its own ecosystem. Perhaps there's some kind of life, some unfortunate, mutated form of life that will reach out, pull you in, and you will be stuck in the ever after of the pile of bullish laundry. What am I on about? No goddamn idea, but it makes about as much sense as some of the booking decisions on this particular show. I'm John Rant with the Retro Review, WCW Spring Stampede 1998. Just past the 25-year anniversary of this show happening, and ho ho ho! WCW would enter a hot period kind of briefly in the summer and maybe even the early fall of 1998, but I said it when I reviewed Super Brawl 1998. The wheels were coming off. That was the subtitle. And boy, the wheels were really coming off here. They did have a couple decent hooks. I had to put that in here because Shivani's on this show. For the following Nitro, Goldberg against Raven and Savage wanting to get the WCW title back because Randy Savage beat Sting. Oh, geez. Anything good that came out of this pay-per-view was immediately negated by either bad booking decisions or they just pretty much reversed course by the following Nitro. I mean, they're in Denver, Colorado, Denver Coliseum, 10,200 seat capacity. The attendance was around 7,500 people. So if you factor in the stage and the obstructed seats being taken away, that was pretty much a sellout, if not close to it. And WCW was still in a hot period by this point, even though right here, 6 days before, they lost the first, they lost first head-to-head battle in the ratings in nearly 2 years. And then the following Nitro, they would actually win, they would win again, and they would trade ratings victories, and pretty much after Goldberg won the WCW title, even though there would be some more trading, by the fall of 1998, when Ric Flair made his return, and then the Halloween Havoc, the following Nitro and Halloween Havoc, they would win, because they had to show Goldberg versus DDP for free, because somebody screwed up formatting the pay-per-view. Gee, I wonder who the fuck that was. Good God, Nash and Hall going on too long. Warrior and Hogan going on way too long, and eventually it got to where, oh, beep, it just all cut out. I remember watching that pay-per-view at a friend's house. We were not happy. Well, the person that paid for the pay-per-view wasn't happy. But yeah, WCW before that, God damn it. Some pay-per-views have aged so well. Some of the stuff from the late 80s, even like 1992 and maybe some parts of 93, 94 have aged better. The one thing, and Bischoff has said this in interviews, they never knew how to have proper finishes to matches. They weren't the only company. ECW had that issue, even though ECW would deliver some really, really high-impact, high-quality entertainment as far as some of their big matches, even if stuff got overbooked. But their pay-per-views, at times, had a decent flow to them. Like, that's the one thing about ECW that even I have to admit. They had a pretty good flow to enough of their pay-per-views. WWE was kicking it in the high gear because Stone Cold had beaten Shawn Michaels for the championship just about 3 weeks before this. But yeah, that tagline, the biggest, the baddest, no bull. Get a video package on the NWO Power Struggle. Which, if they had just had Sting beat Hogan cleanly at Starrcade 98 and go on a run, if he had held the championship from there all the way to this point and lost the title, it would have meant more. But no, he won the title in a fluke, stupid finish that made Bret Hart seem ridiculous. Hogan couldn't do the clean job because Sting wasn't tan enough. Or, that doesn't work for me, brother. Then they held the title up after a fuck finish where Hogan held the tights on the following Nitro. And then they didn't even have the WCW Championship defended on Sold Out the next pay-per-view. They had it addressed in a very, very long segment. Hogan beat Sting for the championship at Super Brawl, the following month. And then they did a terrible finish with him and Scott Hall. They had Hogan and Sting in a cage, or no, they had Hogan and Savage in a cage match I did not review Uncensored 98 because I was busy at that point. I may go back and retro-review it at some point. A steel cage match that ended in a no contest. This whole company was just fucked. Let's get to the show. So anyway, Heenan, Schiavone, Mike Tenay, they welcome us. They mention Savage's injury. Because Savage, I believe, had hurt his knee at Halloween Havoc 97. Because that was the cage match with Piper and it was Piper and Hogan. Savage did the double axe handle spot, not from the top rope, but from the top of the cage. That bulky, ridiculous cage. And as great as Savage, and I love Randy Savage. What a goddamn talent. What a great, great spokesperson for wrestling he was. Intense as fuck. But god damn it, he was insane. Because he'd been wrestling for about 20 years by that, or over 20 years. And his knees were shot. And his knees were more shot by that point. But he kept wrestling, even though his knees were tenderized hamburger. And then he would actually tear his ACL. It was either during this match or during the build-up to this match. I'm trying to remember. Because he wrestled for a while on a bad wheel, and then his other wheel went out. And he kept wrestling. And then eventually he needed to get surgery sometime in June? Was it June of 98? Because I know that he made his return at the Nitro right after, or on the Nitro rather, right after Starrcade 1998 to help Flair beat Bischoff for power, but Jesus. It's amazing that Savage actually was able to do anything after this. Well, actually, he wasn't able to really do much of it. Remember his stuff for 1999? No, you don't. Stop. Don't try to remember Randy Savage at the end of his wrestling career. Remember him as this great performer that even when he was bulked up or when he was slimmed down, he could do great shit. Goldberg took on Saturn with Kidman. Not the only time we see Kidman on this show. So Saturn with hair is just off-putting is what I noted. At one point, Goldberg early on tosses Kidman right outside on Saturn. Let me just say, Saturn did the best he could. He bumped his ass off, but this match needed to be half the time that it was. Because Goldberg at this point was still inexperienced and shouldn't have been working long matches. And by Christ, it got rough. It got rough. The crowd was into it because they were into Goldberg because they wanted to overlook the fact that he couldn't fucking work. The streak worked. It really did work until they gimmicked and decided to go all crazy on it. And had they kept it legit, or had they just maybe said, hey, here are the house show results. Goldberg beat 2 guys during this week. Oh, okay. But the problem is people would read the dirt sheets. They would know this stuff. They would find out on the internet, even in its infancy, wait, a lot of people didn't work these house shows. So we get spears, we get a distraction, we get a top rope press where Saturn just gets tossed off. The Flock runs in, spear to Kidman, and then a rings of Saturn where Goldberg powers out of it and actually just uses pure unadulterated strength to lift Saturn up for the jackhammer 1, 2, 3. So it had a pretty good finish. That's uncoachable fucking strength. You can't coach anybody on how to do that. That was a pretty damn good finish. It just took forever to get there. Goldberg wins, continues the streak. Ultimo Dragon taking on Chavo Guerrero with Eddie. So this is when Eddie was basically trying to bring something out of Chavo. Basically to tell Chavo to stop, degrading the Guerrero name like he's currently doing. Him and Vicky. Fuck both of them. They both should have been gone instead of Eddie. At least Eddie was positive for wrestling. Ultimo really did shine in WCW, but it was a few months after this, I think, that he suffered some sort of elbow injury where he was done in WCW and would recover and go back to Japan. There was an Asai moonsault. Chavo ends up hitting a drop kick. That's an inadvertent low blow, but he wants to win the right way, even though Eddie has on the back of his shirt, cheat to win. And then Dragon manages to counter the Tornado DDT into a Dragon Sleeper, and there you go. Eddie's yelling at Chavo. And this would lead to a feud that really was messy. It was really, I mean, I know they liked working with each other, but it was really messy. Booker T took on renowned murderer Chris Benoit, who wasn't a renowned murderer at this point. Wrestling wouldn't book a renowned murderer, Vince McMahon with Jimmy Snuka and other people. Yeah. His for a TV championship, they always work well together, but I can't. I've tried in the past. I still try to watch Chris Benoit matches. I can't. I just fucking can't do it. We did get a ref bump. We got a crossface, a possible tap out. Benoit thought he won, but he didn't. Harlem sidekick, 1, 2, 3. Booker retains the TV championship. Kurt Hennig with Rick Rude took on British Bulldog with Jim Neidhart, and oh dear. Had this match taken place even in 1993, it would have been better. Hell, even 94. But goddamn. Rude and Neidhart were handcuffed together. And unfortunately, the shenanigans outside the ring took away from what was happening inside the ring, which was probably a good thing, because what was happening in the ring was two guys, and this is before Bulldog's back injury, because nobody told him about the goddamn trapdoor. Thanks, Bischoff and whoever else was involved. Fuck Ultimate Warrior, by the way. I'm glad he's dead. And Neidhart and Rude handcuffed together. Hennig and Bulldog had seen better days, because Bulldog wasn't as motivated. Hennig had a back injury. Both had substance issues by this point that would become more pronounced later on. Both were taken way too soon. They died within a year of each other, I believe. I think Bulldog died in 2000. Was it 2? It was the late spring, early summer of 2002. And Hennig died in February 2003. So we get some shenanigans with Neidhart choking out a black cop. Boy, Denver really is progressive, aren't they? But it turns out, oh, it's not a cop, it's Vincent. He frees Rude, and then Rude helps Hennig win. Bulldog hits the post, 1, 2, 3, and then they choke out Bulldog with the nightstick, and Neidhart's covered, or handcuffed rather, to the post. And Vincent is trying to taunt him. Vincent, like he ever did anything good in wrestling after the whole DiBiase angle, he didn't. Whew. This was shit. And it wouldn't get much better. Chris Jericho defended the Cruiserweight Championship against Prince Iukea. Why did Prince Iukea get so many opportunities in WCW? It's not that he was terrible. I just don't quite understand why Prince Iukea got so many shots. Because he was a TV champion, battled William Regal, and I believe in 97. And then was it 97? I think it was 97. And then he would get cruiserweight shots. They would make him the artist formerly known as Prince Iukea. Thank you very much, Vince Russo, you piece of shit. The crowd did not care about this. Jericho was in full mocking Malenko mode, which would lead to Slamboree and a great unmasking where, that's the Cyclope! That was actually a great moment, because that was probably the biggest pop that Malenko had received up to that point in his career. That's not knocking Malenko, but it's true. So Lion Tamer wins it. This crowd really did not give a shit about this. Then Buff Bagwell comes out in a cast. My hands hurt. I can't wrestle. This match is canceled. It's supposed to be Buff and Scott Steiner against Rick Steiner and Lex Luger. And then here's J.J. Dillon with Mean Gene. And then a doctor comes out. And then Buff grabs J.J. with the bad hand. Oh no, my hands hurt. Ow, ow, ow. And then the match is made official. So it's Rick Steiner and Lex Luger with Ted DiBiase, who I forgot was still in the company by this point. I thought he was gone by early 98. I know that he was there at Super Brawl, but I thought he was fired right after that. But Buff and Scott are their opponents. It was a jump start. This woke the crowd up briefly. They wanted to see Rick and Scott face off against each other after Scott had turned on Rick at Super Brawl 8. Everything ties back to Super Brawl 8, and we just skip over Uncensored 98, which is probably smart. So, messy as fuck. Rick chases Scott to the back, and then we get the torture rack on Buff Bagwell for the win. I mean, it was maybe 6 minutes, so the crowd wasn't bored. But the crowd was bored by the next match. It was an added match. La Parka against Psychosis. This crowd didn't give a shit. It wasn't even bad, but any interactions these guys had were either on Nitro in matches that nobody cared about, or even worse, on Thunder that they had just launched about 3 months prior? Was it the beginning of January? Maybe the 8th of January, 1998? So that was still in its infancy. It was a boring show that, yeah, they wanted to utilize their roster, and it wasn't a good idea. Had they never done Thunder, you have to wonder if WCW would have imploded as much as it did. Yeah, it was going to implode. But anyway, guillotine leg drop, 1, 2, 3. It was 7 minutes, and it was something you could have seen on Nitro, and maybe the crowd would have cared. The crowd could have gotten up and gotten popcorn. The crowd could have popped into a Soma coma for a bit, which it seemed like they did. But the next match was a Soma coma because we had Hogan and Nash. And keep in mind, even though Hogan and Nash had their strife, Hogan wanted to have the WCW Championship. He needed Nash on his side because Nash was facing a Giant, and Hogan wanted somebody to help him against the Giant and Piper. So it's Hogan and Nash against the Piper and Giant. And you're thinking, okay, big brawl, they're going to have this because Hogan and Piper are limited. Nash was limited just because of injury. I mean, he admitted that had he had 2 working knees, his career might have been better. And you know what? Good that he's healthier now. But the Giant also, they had this thing where Nash and Powerbomb Giant, all this stuff tying together in Hogan and Piper's history. It was a baseball bat on a pole match. With Piper with a bad hip and a replaced hip. Hogan with knees that were shot. Nash that... You really think that Nash was going to get up on anything other than maybe the bottom rope? No, he didn't need to leave his feet to draw money. And Giant, bless him, this was bad. This was really, really bad. This was painful. This was excruciating. This went for about 15 minutes and felt like 30. I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but whoever thought about that should have honestly been fired into the sun along with their family. But Piper and Hogan couldn't move. Nash and Giant going at it sort of got the crowd into it. I mean, the crowd, at times they would be into it because of the star power, but it was messy. They had the bat hanging from this lengthy, like, you know, string. Pulls this string! Pulls this string! Like I'm milking a giant udder. And so the bat gets involved, but Hogan tosses it away. And then the disciple, who was Brutus Beefcake. At the time, I didn't know it was Brutus Beefcake because he actually looked different. He looked like a wrestler by that point. Sorry. Beefcake was fine for a while, and then the parasailing accident, and Brother Brudai, and the Booty Man, the Zodiac, and the Man with No Name, and I'm sure there are other names I'm forgetting, but seriously, he went through so many gimmicks in WCW. And then the disciple. He gives Hogan the bat. Hogan hits the Giant with the bat. While the referee is distracted, he had to sneak this bat in because it wasn't the legal bat. Okay, so it could be... What? Just why? Who thought of this? Who thought? It was probably Hogan. Hogan probably thought this was a good idea. In fact, this sounds like the stupid idea that Hogan would come up with. I'm sorry, but just this was hilarious to me. Nash holds Piper. This is after the Giant's down. Holds Piper. They're going to hit Piper in the bad hip, and then Hogan hits Nash on accident. And then says, I didn't mean to. It's a little bit later. This seemed to go on a lot longer than it probably did. It probably did when they tried to, you know, plan it out. And then Piper's down, seemingly giving up on this schlock. Nash gets the Giant up because Hogan's like, powerbomb the Giant, brother. And then he hits Nash with it because he hit his tag partner because I guess his tag partner wasn't... I don't know. I don't even think they knew at this point. I don't think they had a clue what they were doing. Why? To what end? Why'd they do that? By the way, Hogan, according to Wikipedia, Hogan and Nash were declared the winners because they used the bat first. But the referee just seemingly called for the bell after Hogan hit Nash with the bat. Who came up with this? isn't the last we see of Hogan and the Disciple either. Or Dash. This is the third match from the top, by the way. The Slamboree commercial, all epic. I don't remember much about Slamboree 98. I'd retro review more of these, but my brain nearly melted retro reviewing the entire last year of WCW, which in hindsight, if I had actually thought about it, I would have started with Fall Brawl 99 and just gone all the way through from Bischoff being out of power and going to Russo being out of power, in power and out of power and back in power and the reboot and all that stuff. But the last year nearly broke me from the reboot episode. Broke me to the point that I can't even pronounce proper English. Raven took on DDP in a match that at least was the best part of the upper card. In fact, it was the only good part of the upper card. In fact, it was the only good thing of the last... I would argue it was the only good thing since... It was pretty much the best thing on the show, actually, now that I think about it. Raven's Rules match, U.S. Championship. Raven had stolen the U.S. title from DDP sometime on either Nitro or Thunder. I don't remember which. Sorry, some of these shows blend together. But Raven, DDP wanted revenge, and DDP planned out his matches. Meticulous playing. Him and Savage ended up doing the best feud of 1997, in all honesty. That or Brett versus Hart, or Brett versus Hart, Brett versus Austin. You could argue whatever, but I would say Savage versus DDP, at least on U.S. soil. Japan, totally different story. But the winner faces Goldberg on the following Nitro. This is the one where Raven does everything to beat DDP, and then Raven gets demolished by Goldberg. But they go into, because it's a Western theme, Stampede, he wagon wheeled him. He hit him with a wagon wheel, not the pasta wagon wheel, but he hit him with the gate and everything, or hit him into the gate, and it's like their birthright bonanza, and then they're going to establish this Ponderosa Ranch. And now the Johnny Cash theme or version is stuck in my head. But yeah, they battle all over. There's a fever, and the only prescription is choking somebody out with a cowbell. Also, DDP went into the WCW website table. Well, actually, Raven did, and then DDP knocked the set over. Why did they have the set among the crowd? Why didn't they have it in the back? That seemed really counterproductive. Was the only plug in the arena? Was there nothing in the back they could have used? Was the modem signal not that strong? These are important questions. Also, Lee Marshall. Lee Marshall was still there. Rest in peace, Lee Marshall. Trying to hype up Super Clash 3 like it was something good. Bless him. Anyway, so the flock runs in. This is after the kitchen sink was used. A bunch of flock members run in, including a guy that was dressed in a hat and a weird thing, and he was a bald guy with a goatee, and it wasn't Hogan, it was Horace Hogan. So it was a Hogan, technically. I kind of contradicted myself. But nobody remembers Horace Hogan in the ring, genuinely. Does anybody remember a Horace Hogan match does anybody remember Horace Hogan? I barely do. He was there for a while and did unremarkable stuff. Nothing against the guy. Maybe he was a fine worker. But there we go. Raven ended up hitting the even flow 1, 2, 3. And he wins the U.S. Championship. And then would drop it to Goldberg soon after. And then Michael Buffer's entrances take 4 years. Let's get ready to... No, not going to do that because that's trademarked. God, him and Cody could have had a lisp off. That's mean. Let's move on to Savage versus Sting. No DQ match. No DQ. Keep that in mind. No DQ. WCW Championship match. So the baseball bat on the pole match was called off seemingly because of whatever. Because they were like, shit, this is going off the rails. But we get a jump start. And then everybody goes into the haystacks. Not Haystacks Calhoun. I think he had been dead for at least 20 years by this point. I actually don't remember when Haystacks Calhoun died. This was rough because Savage had bad knees. Sting wasn't motivated because he had been marginalized after that tremendous build to Starrcade 97. Check out my retro view of that. And no DQ, by the way. We get a ref bump. Why? In a no DQ match. Why? Why do we get a ref bump in a no DQ match? Who thought this was a good idea? Later... Liz hits Sting with a chair. She hits it wrong, by the way, because she has a handle. She's holding the front of the chair. She's holding the head. I like her to hold my head. Nevertheless, she hits him. She doesn't hold the handles. Like her to grip my... Never mind. She on all leather. God, Liz is beautiful. Fuck Lex Luger for helping contribute to her death. Even though she was an adult, seriously. Come on, listen to that 911 call. Just fucking listen to it. She hits Sting with a chair. He sort of tries to sell it, and then it gets all messy. And then Liz gets Stinger splashed in the corner. Sting's all traumatized by hitting the woman that hit him with the chair so much. Savage is about to hit the Sky Elbow. Well, Sting's on a chair, the same chair. And Hogan shoves Savage off and says, that's it. The referee, by the way, I believe is still down by this point because it's Charles Robinson, who loves to take a goddamn nap whenever anybody so much as breathes on him. Charles Robinson, a tremendous referee, but they made him look like a goof. And then here's Nash. Now, Hogan and the Disciple were there, knocked Savage off, and there you go. Then Nash comes out and attacks Sting. Hits a jackknife, and then Savage gets on top 1, 2, 3. And Savage is the new world champion. Okay. He then would drop the title to Hogan, I believe, the next night, because Savage was never allowed to have a championship run that Hogan didn't immediately squash. But here's the big kicker going into Slamboree, going into whatever. So Sting would win the WCW Tag Team Championships with the Giant, and then they would do a thing where Giant would jump back to NWO Hollywood. Nash, by the way, had attacked Sting, at this pay-per-view. Then they would form the NWO Wolfpack a little bit later, with Nash, Sting joining him weeks after this attack. Weeks after costing him the WCW Championship that he had fought so hard for. They had fought for 18 months for, 15, 18 months, wherever the hell it was. Fought so hard for, and then loses it, and so Sting can be mad at Hogan, he can be mad at the Disciple, mad at Nash, but no, he teams with Nash a little bit later, because nobody knew what the fuck was going on in WCW. It's amazing that this company didn't self-destruct completely by 99. But then they would lose $15 million in 99, $60 million in 2000. And even though they were only in business for the first 3 months of 2001, I imagine that even with cost cutting, they probably lost about $20 to $25 million. Could you imagine how much money WCW would have lost had the Turner executives said, yeah, we're going to keep WCW around till the end of the year? One, we wouldn't have gotten the invasion angle. Two, they probably would have lost $200 million. Granted, the merger cost them a whole lot more, but yeah. So, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rutland. I'll see you soon.